Please welcome Michael Fryer.
I'm from Yorkshire, in the north of England. I feel so lucky to have grown up in a part of the world where it seemed like everywhere you turn, you'd see physical evidence of human habitation stretching back thousands of years. I've watched the sun rise from within an ancient stone circle, slept in a house built 400 years ago, and walked on steps worn down to a groove by countless feet. All of this can't help but make you feel that you're just one small part of a much, much bigger picture. This was enhanced by the fact that my grandfather was a history teacher and a truly engaging storyteller. He was born in 1904, and he was called Thomas Bose Carter McKenna. What a fabulous name. With my brother and sister, I remember him taking us to visit ruined abbeys, the remnants of Roman forts, or what seemed just like an empty field. And I still treasure his seemingly magical ability to encourage us while looking at an old pile of stone or an expanse of wheat to conjure in our imagination the song of monks at prayer, the clattering hooves of horses, or the din of battle. He taught us that stone is a great storyteller if you take the time to listen. Just 35 miles from where I was born is the city that the Romans called Iberacum, the Vikings called Jorvik, and we call York. Now, you may well have New York over here. We've got the original. Dominating the skyline is York Minster, the city's cathedral. The first recorded church on this site was built in 627. Over the next few centuries, various places of worship were built and then destroyed by fire or war until work on the current cathedral began in 1220. They didn't finish it until 1472. Built on the location and on the foundations of what went before it, 252 years span from that first day of work until it was finally completed. This one building has been at the heart of York for the past 800 years. Walking into it, you are immediately jolted out of what's familiar. Huge stone columns rise to meet in Gothic arches that support vaulted ceilings. Light streams through stained glass. The great east window is the size of a tennis court. Its 311 panels tell stories in color. You think differently in this kind of space. It inspires awe. What strikes me most when I reflect on all of this is that out of everyone who commissioned it, who designed it, who paid for it, and who built it, only the tiniest fraction ever saw it completed. They wouldn't be there for that momentous day of celebration and consecration, despite having spent whole lifetimes trying to build something. They just wouldn't be there. And the amazing thing is, they knew this at the time, and still they carried on. They embodied the wisdom of the Talmud that says, "You are not obligated to complete the task, and nor are you obliged." They embodied the wisdom of the Talmud that says, "You are not obligated to complete the task, and nor are you permitted to abandon it." It reminds me of what I've learned about building peace. I first met Ray and Kathleen Davey in 1996. Ray and Kathleen were central to the story of the Corrymeela community, the oldest centre for peace and reconciliation on the island of Ireland. Corrymeela is where I learned my trade. From 1942 to 1945, Ray was a prisoner of war. He witnessed at first hand the horrific aftermath of the Allied bombing of Dresden. From his prisoner of war camp, surrounded by death and destruction, he forged a lifelong commitment to peace. Since 1965, Corrymeela has provided an alternative to the path of violence. It's been a place of encounter and healing, laughter and tears. It's flawed, but it's deeply authentic. When it comes to building peace, Corrymeela has taught me that the small things matter. Welcome people. Remember their names. Be okay with silence. Listen to stories. Practice what you preach. Don't rush things. There are no quick fixes. One of the most challenging lessons I've taken from Corrymeela is that when it comes to building peace, our task is to intentionally create the space in which something might happen, while accepting that we may never know what or when that will be. Try explaining that one to a funder. I'm a teacher. I come from a family of teachers. I've already mentioned my grandfather, but so too is my mother, and my father, and my brother, and my sister, and they both married teachers too. I guess it's in the blood. When you trace the word learn back to its Proto-Germanic origins, you find that it means to follow a path. At the Kroc school, we follow paths. We also develop new ones. As a learning community, our focus is on how to respond to and navigate the complex world of peace, conflict, justice, and change. The German writer Thomas Mann wrote, "War is only a cowardly escape from the problems of peace." In the classroom, I introduce theories, concepts, and ideas, and with those as a foundation, and alongside my students, we develop the capacities, skills, insights, and understandings that enable us to engage effectively with those problems of peace. It's not just about increasing our knowledge. It's about the quality of our presence, not just the quality of our intellect. Our approach to this work needs to have one foot grounded firmly in the lived reality, while the other is in the realm of creativity, possibility, the imagination, and that balance is key. We learn together, and the paths that we forge hopefully lead the way for others to follow. I connect people and ideas, trying to bring them together, while offering an opportunity to ask important questions and listen deeply. Every student I work with will go on to make the world a more peaceful place. Some will become famous. Most won't, but I'm proud to accompany them all. One of the most important things I do is to encourage curiosity. My time in Northern Ireland was characterized by seeing that transformative change emerges when we look and listen in new ways. When we see or hear something, what do we actually pay attention to? What are we missing? Whose voices do we marginalize, and which stories do we ignore? Building peace and building cathedrals has a lot in common, and I think we're looking at both of them the wrong way. Changing how we view things greatly enhances our ability to appreciate the true story and a deeper understanding of a multi-layered and multi-generational process. I think it's too easy to romanticize them both. A cathedral is a thing of beauty, undeniably so. But it's also true that the Normans, who built most of Europe's cathedrals, certainly the older ones, they tended to do so in the sites of most local resistance to their rule. They were a thing of power. Alongside the examples of ingenuity, inspiration, and wonder are also tales of oppression, blood, and injustice. They're all part of the same story, and the same is true with peace. The romantic idea is that the people who built the cathedrals did so for the greater glory of God. And while this may well have been part of the motivation, I think it's also true that they did so to feed their families. It was a job. If they didn't work, their families were hungry. Simple as that. They achieved something truly incredible, but they'd have probably preferred an easier life. We imagine people working in the heart of conflict, And too often we think that they do so because of some great passion for peace and justice. I think the reality is, although that may well emerge over time, they do so because they don't have any other option. Their family and their communities are being ripped apart by violence. Someone had to do something. They didn't have the luxury of choice. We should all be deeply grateful for these reluctant builders and the sacrifices that they make. When we imagine the people who built the cathedrals, our minds tend to gravitate towards the master stonemasons or the ornate woodcarvers. We don't normally recognize and appreciate the contributions made by the so-called unskilled laborers or the structural carpenters. We think about the ingenuity of the engineers, but not the person whose sweat and toil raised those stones by turning a cog all day. We think about the men, but not the women. Reflecting on the peace process in Northern Ireland, most minds turn to individuals such as Senator George Mitchell, the Nobel Peace Prize winners David Trimble or John Hume. I don't. I think of Anna Glass, Desi McClernand, Peter Montgomery, Shona Scanlon, and Kathleen Bakewell. Ray Davey taught me, and those he inspired, to appreciate, recognize, and therefore value those who work behind the scenes. The people who cook meals, repair broken things, clean toilets, and answer the phone are never going to win the big peace awards. Those who do couldn't do so without them. As we look to the future, let's broaden our understanding of what building peace is and who does it. Even the smallest act has significance. There's a sign above the door when you exit Corrymeela, which says, Corrymeela begins when you leave. As you leave this theatre tonight, perhaps you can imagine a sign that says, peace and justice begin when you leave. It's a challenging statement because it calls on us to recognize our personal responsibility. But it's also an encouraging one because it reminds us that we can each make a difference. When we think about what that difference looks like, let's keep an eye on the bigger picture. Despite the urgency of so many tasks, I think it's really important that we see that big lens, the bigger vision of what we're trying to do. In an age dominated by social media, let's see through the unhealthy demand for instant impact and instant recognition, the elixir of external validation, and the unhealthy pressure to create your own personal brand. For the past 5.5 centuries, people at York Minster have been conserving and maintaining something that someone else created. Those of us working towards peace can learn a lot from that. What do we do with what we've been left? What do we leave for someone else to take up? And how do we nurture and sustain ourselves and those who accompany us on this path? Next year, York Minster celebrates the 800th anniversary of when work on it began. In 800 years from now, I very much doubt if any of us will be remembered. But the truth is, it really doesn't matter, because the peace each of us in our own small way is building will be. Thank you very much.